Okay, great. Our next speaker is Johanna from USC, the Norman Lear Center at USC, where she's a media scholar. And our circles kind of overlapped in a different way. In my day job, I work at a nonprofit newsroom, and the work that Johanna has done at the Norman Lear Center is something that we're very much interested in. And so it's very great to be able to work with Johanna in this capacity in the outdoor world, in the design world. She has an amazing TED Talk about kind of touching on the same ideas that she's going to cover today about design patents, copyright, intellectual property. It just seems like there's a lot going on in that area these days with Lululemon suing people over the style lines of their products. I just thought it was a really interesting idea, and to bring in someone who could talk to us about that idea and how we can apply it, how maybe it can help us do our work better, what kind of things to look out for. Those are the kinds of ideas that we asked Johanna to come in and discuss with us today. So thank you very much. Welcome, Johanna Blakely.
Thank you, Sam and Michelle, for having me here. Should I mount this? Why not? All right. Hello, everybody. I'm the girl from the Dalles. I mentioned that earlier. I never go back, ever. I try to avoid it. Okay. So most people in the United States, and really around the world, don't realize that there's very little intellectual property protection for apparel designs, footwear designs. There's no copyright protection. It's pretty difficult to get patent protection, especially utility patent protection. All fashion designers typically have to lean on is trademark. And so that means that somebody could come in here and basically make a perfect copy of just about anything that anybody is wearing here and wouldn't have to worry about a lawsuit. So trademark protection is really the stalwart within the fashion industry. This is the monopoly that you own, your brand within the marketplace. And so you see a lot of fashion designers, especially on the luxury end, just flaunting it in every possible way because they know that nobody can make a copy of that. That's piracy. And so it's one reason that you see a lot of high-end designers who have very valuable trademarks. They incorporate these things directly into the aesthetic design of their products. And they do this not because they're just braggarts, which they usually are, but they're also just trying to make it harder for people to knock off their stuff. But you see all kinds of weird, this is very Santee Alley, if you know Los Angeles. Then I wanted to pick out a few of them. I know I love these. These are totally collectible, right? Adidas. So the courts have decided long ago and over again in the US that apparel designs are too utilitarian to qualify for copyright protection, which is supposed to be for artistic goods. Their worry was that some random designer could say that they invented, a certain collar, a certain cuff, a certain pleat, whatever. And they thought that that would not actually service innovation. And that's really the logic of copyright and all intellectual property structures. It's not about rewarding somebody because they're really creative and artistic. It's really about innovation. So the logic is without ownership, there is no incentive to innovate. So knowing that, it's really kind of strange to discover that there's a lot of innovation in the fashion apparel industry with very little ownership. So how does that work? Well, it's very counterintuitive for a lot of people because it's so different from music, from film, television, photography, graphic design. It is a minefield out there. You cannot sample from other people's work in your own industry, in those industries. In the fashion industry, generally, you can steal and snap up and remix from just about anybody. And this has been the modus operandi because the courts have not granted copyright protection to fashion designers. So one of my big arguments in the TED Talk is that the innovation that you see in the fashion industry is actually a direct result of the fact that there's so little ownership. It makes for a very competitive and difficult industry, but it also makes for a very innovative one. Now, the people who are taking the most obvious advantage of this glorious Creative Commons is the fast fashion industry. They are just knocking off people faster than anybody imagined it would be possible. And a lot of high-end designers are truly pissed about this, and they have launched all kinds of lawsuits. The only ones they tend to win are ones when the fast fashion industry has just been too lazy to change the textile design. Because you can copyright a two-dimensional design. That is basically a piece of art. It's artful, not utilitarian, and so somebody owns it. But the courts generally dismiss these lawsuits from fashion designers, saying that the fast fashion industry has not hurt their business, and I'll offer some numbers later on. So there are lots of virtues to this sort of wild and woolly world of copying in the apparel industry. One is what a lot of cultural commentators have called the democratization of fashion. So there are more options for people to buy into apparel at more price points than ever existed previously. And cultural commentators will say, clothing is the way we express ourselves, whether we like it or not. People judge us by what we wear. It is a way of articulating our identities. It is best that we have a large palette to draw from. And the fast fashion industry has actually made that more possible than ever before. Also, because of the fast fashion industry, you see a faster establishment of global trends, which can end up being very beneficial to people who are trend setters. The trend is set more quickly, they move more product, money. So within this system, this ecology of copying and trends and creativity, you have all of these incentives to create the next new trend, to come up with the next big thing. And that just ends up accelerating the entire cycle. It's entirely exhausting, but it also can prove to be really good for an industry. Now, fashion is not the only industry that has very little intellectual property protection, particularly copyright protection. Chefs complain bitterly because they cannot copyright their recipes, and they cannot copyright the look and feel of even an incredibly adorable dish like that. Oh my God, where did she find that picture? I don't know. I love you, Veronica. I love you, Veronica. Automobiles, no matter how whackadelic they look, they are utilitarian objects and therefore do not qualify for copyright protection. Same with furniture, magic tricks, hairstyles. Oh my God, you gotta read the literature. IP and hairstyles, it's the best. Databases, very difficult to get a copyright protection for databases. The open source movement was basically a bunch of programmers who said, I don't think we want to copyright this. We want to keep it open so that people can update it and make it better. Tattoo world, very interesting. These are two-dimensional designs, pieces of art. They qualify for copyright protection, but it's not cool, right, to litigate in tattoo culture. So I'm sure there are exceptions, but generally not cool. Jokes you cannot copyright, and so you see comics fighting bitterly about people stealing their jokes. Fireworks do not qualify. They are not physically fixed expressions of ideas and therefore do not qualify for copyright. The rules of games, like recipes, cannot be protected, though the two-dimensional design of the board is actually a two-dimensional design and therefore copyright protected. And the signature sort of aroma of a perfume, no copyright protection for that, and that's why you see all of those knockoff kiosks and malls and stuff. Those are perfectly legal. They just can't say it's Chanel No. 5. They can say it's like Chanel No. 5. So some of these industries are sort of marginal, right? But a lot of them are not marginal when you're looking at gross sales. So on the left side, you'll see a bunch of industries that do not have copyright protection, and on the right, you'll see a few industries that have a lot of copyright protection. Not that it's doing them much good these days. So once I discovered that there were so many incredibly creative industries where there's no copyright protection, it's like, what is the logic behind this? And so this was my attempt to sort of lay it out and reveal its sort of internal ruptures. There's two primary binary distinctions that are at play in determining whether something qualifies for copyright protection. The first is it a piece of art or is it utilitarian? Guess what? That's blurry line. That can be a mess. So that's already a difficult sort of designation. I'm sure some people think, oh, I know it when I see it, but that's already a difficult sort of binary opposition to propose. The second one, which has become more troublesome in a digital age, is it an idea? As I was talking about earlier, you can have all kinds of ideas. Nobody owns those. But once it's a physically fixed expression, you own it outright. And if it's artful, then you get copyright protection. So as you can see in a digital economy, this becomes blurrier in our minds. You know, we used to know what a book looked like. We used to know what an album looked like. These were physical objects, and so it made a little more sense that you weren't supposed to copy them without permission of the author. But as digital files, it just feels strange. These things feel like things we should share. And so it's one reason that at the Norman Lear Center, the think tank that I'm based at, this has been an issue we've been exploring for 15 years now, looking at ownership regimes in the digital age and trying to figure out what is the best sort of scenario for ownership in order to increase innovation in all creative industries. We know that things probably need to change, and the copyright code is one thing that needs to change. Diane von Furstenberg, you probably know her. She has been the head of the CFDA forever, the Council for Fashion Designers of America. And she's been pushing very hard to get copyright protection for fashion designs. And it looked like in 2011, with like her 5th bill, she'd finally come up with something that was going to pass. But then there was a House subcommittee meeting and the data was unveiled. The big argument from Diane von Furstenberg and all these sort of high-end American designers was that the fast fashion industry was cutting into their profits. So some academics from UCLA went through and sort of sliced up the market for women's dresses prices, and in the top decile is where you would find the Ralph Laurens and the Marc Jacobs. And they saw that prices had actually gone up over the years that the fast fashion industry had really sort of taken hold in the United States. And prices in other deciles had remained quite stable. They also discovered what we probably felt was true, which the fast fashion industry has made it possible for prices to actually go down. So clothing has become more affordable, the high-end designers are making more money than ever. What are they complaining about? Now, a lot of designers have claimed, well, the United States is weird. They just do not respect fashion and apparel designers. In other countries, they do. And so I wanted to take a look, how do they figure out a way to protect designs in other countries? So I looked at 2 huge markets. Japan is one of them, and they have a design law in place there. And apparel does qualify, but you have to prove that it is completely unique and nothing similar has ever existed before. Very Japanese, very Japanese. So nobody gets it. In the European Union, they took the opposite approach with their community design law. They're like, anybody can register any design that's different from any other design that's on the books. And so, Diane von Furstenberg used this as her model for the copyright protection she was trying to introduce here in the States. But, I checked the books, and it's like there's very few lawsuits. There's all these fast fashion giants in Europe, all these luxury houses. Nobody's registering their designs really, or very few are. There's no litigation. It's like, what's going on? So I took a look at some of the designs that were getting protected, and just to look at a bunch of Nike shirts, you'll see they're barely distinguishable from one another. Each one of these is registered as a unique design that cannot be copied. So the problem is that a knockoff artist can do something just a little bit different from any one of these designs and register that as a unique new design. So it doesn't end up staving off any sort of copying. And generally, it's harder to copy something perfectly, right? It's easier to kind of copy it. So it just doesn't end up serving a purpose, and that's why I think people aren't using it. So one thing that designers they've leaned on design patents for decades. Some companies, like Gucci's been in there for a long time, and Nike's been there for a long time. But now you see upstarts like Lululemon really trying to secure design patents for their work. And so I thought I'd sort of define what it is, because it's a weird sort of area of patent law. It's a very small percentage of patents that are actually design patents. Most of them are utilitarian patents, the kinds that you guys are familiar with. So it only covers useful products, utilitarian products, so fashion qualifies, apparel qualifies. But it doesn't cover what makes those objects useful. So whatever's making it functional, no. That can't be covered by a design patent. It's usually surface ornamentation. That's what's getting covered. And this has been the big stickler. This is one reason that a lot of fashion designers have gone, I don't know if I can prove this. It's supposed to be novel, that is new, and it's supposed to be non-obvious. Now that is tough. The courts have not swallowed that. So anyway, a lot of fashion designers just hadn't even bothered in the past to try this, but I think there's been a lot of frustration because they didn't get the copyright protection, so they thought, okay, let me see if I can lock stuff down with design patents. Nike has been doing this for a long, long time. They have a lot of design patents. I can't remember how many now. You guys probably know. But this will offer you sort of an example of what would receive the design patent. On the left, you see, it doesn't show up very well. But where you can see the hard lines on the left, that's what the design patent covers. It's just those weird springy things inside the shoe. They deliberately make the lines for the rest of the shoe dashed because they don't want to dictate what the full shoe wear is supposed to look like. So that means that somebody who is infringing on their design patent could be inserting those little springy things into full-length knee boots, into sliders, into thongs. It doesn't matter what the rest of the shoe looks like. So they obviously received good legal counsel in putting that together. But it certainly didn't stop Walmart from doing like a perfect knockoff, and I think they lost that case. It was settled. Jimmy Choo has been in this game for a while with various ornamentation on his shoes, what he's famous for, but I found this one. This is a pair of sunglasses. The dashed lines represent whatever kind of sunglass face it might be, because they could look like anything. The only thing that he owns, and he actually did get a design patent for this, is that little oval hole in the side of the frame. So he owns that hole. Don't touch it. Don't stick it in your stuff because Jimmy Choo's coming after you. So once again, he received probably the right kind of guidance from legal counsel, but novel and non-obvious? I don't know. So I want to take a look to see if indeed we have seen a big increase in applications and grants. Because a lot of articles had said, this is the next new thing in the industry. Everybody's filing design patents. And you'll see there was a 20% increase from 2011 to 2013. Then things kind of settled down in 2014. So the similar number of grants, slightly higher approval rate from the year before, really negligible. But you see the numbers actually going down in terms of the applications. So this may be a sign that the big companies have realized, maybe this isn't working for us. There are perks and there are problems with having design patents. You get a monopoly on a design for 14 years. Nobody else can use it. The downside of that is that other people have monopolies on designs for 14 years that you can't use. And you need to check to see what those are in order to make sure you're not, accidentally infringing. It costs about $2 to $3K a pop. That's just a general estimation. I'm sure there's a range. But legal counsel will tell you if you have a full collection, they'll say you will probably want to get a design patent for this, little tiny elements. So it can add up. It takes about 15 months, for a lot of people in the apparel industry, it's like, forget it, that's an eternity. So that has turned off a lot of people over the years. But now there's an expedited process. You pay an extra $900 and you can do it in 5 months. Still, maybe a little bit too long, for your fashion cycle. But some designers like Alexander Wang, he's been very aggressive getting utility patents for those little corners on his purse. And he also got a design patent for those corners on his purse. He probably made the decision that this is going to be sort of an iconic thing for me. I'm going to incorporate this into my lines for a decade to come. So I'm going to try to own it. But still a ton of knockoffs. He was not able to litigate against these guys who have four-cornered purses that, if anybody knows the Alexander Wang bag, they'll look at this and go, that's a knockoff of Alexander Wang. So it didn't work. The interesting thing is that when I looked at this, I thought, Karen Millen? She knocked off Alexander Wang? I kind of liked Karen Millen, Did they have Karen Millen here in Portland? It's a British designer. I've really liked her stuff over the years. And after I saw this, I thought, ooh, she's kind of a knockoff artist, isn't she? And so there's the rub, right? It can be okay to copy. Oh, it's legal to copy. But if Miuccia Prada is copying Karl Lagerfeld, people laugh at her. I mean, you got to show you got the goods. You got to show that you have some sort of aesthetic. You have some idea to share. You need to set a trend in order to be important in this industry. And so reputation is crucial. So, as Sam mentioned, Lululemon has been pretty aggressive with the design patents recently. The last I checked, I think they have 33 registered in the United States. And, they sued Calvin Klein over their ass pants, Astro pants, whatever. They are ass pants. And then they sued Hanes and Target over like a tank thing with a built-in bra. And then they got some pushback. Hanes said, They said, you know what? That's neither novel nor non-obvious. And that's when some of the critics started coming out and weighing in, including even Susan Scafidi. She's an academic at Fordham University, fashion IP scholar. She's been very pro-copyright for the fashion industry, so I've been battling her on panels for years now. And she came out and she's like, I don't know that the patent office knows anything about apparel. So she called last year and asked whether they had anybody on staff who was a specialist in apparel design. They had nobody. So all of the patents that have been given to apparel designs at the PTO were not really knowledgeable apparel industry people. So the fear is that eventually this is going to make it to court. The Hanes thing settled. And I'm so curious what they ended up coming up with there. But once they get into the courts, the suspicion is that some judges are going to turn to the USPTO and say, what the hell are you thinking? This is neither novel nor non-obvious. Quit giving out these design patents. So this is what some people suspect is going to happen next. Lululemon has been accused of being a patent troll, and I think one reason the copyright bill has not landed on the House floor yet is because during that subcommittee meeting, it turned out that one of the members was from Silicon Valley. And she said, I'm a little worried that we could have something like the patent troll problem with copyright in the fashion industry, where people are just kind of try to lock down some really basic generic concepts, and then when a real inventor uses those concepts without knowing that somebody else has just patented them or copyrighted them without ever making anything, then we're going to have a big problem with innovation. And there were a lot of nodding heads at the subcommittee, and it's like, I think that's what may have sunk that copyright bill, which nobody talks about anymore. So you may think that I'm just, free for all, Creative Commons, let's just share everything. I'm not that girl. I believe there should be ownership when it makes sense. I think trademark works very well for the consumer and for the industry. It's important that you know provenance with a product, and so I think piracy is a bad thing. And I think it's great that people can actually own their brand and carve out a monopoly in the marketplace that means something. And especially with performance wear, it's like, you do not want to get stuck on top of that mountain with some knockoff stuff that's like, no, it's not waterproof. Oh my God, it's not working. Trade dress is sort of a not well understood aspect of trademark protection. It's when the overall look and feel of a product is so indicative of a brand that if somebody else knocks it off, then it'll be confusing to the consumer about the source. So I think that's a decent kind of protection that makes sense. I'm so excited to see more wearable technology coming into the marketplace. I think there's still not enough. I think high-end designers should be going all out, making sure that their haute couture designs are just filled with functionality, that you never sweat, that you feel fabulous, and you're always the right temperature. Isn't that what they should be doing for all of us? So I'm waiting for that to become an even bigger trend. But the interesting aspect in terms of ownership is that when you include patented technology in your designs, it's easier for you to hold on to that. It's harder for people to knock it off. So it's kind of an ownership logic that I think works for innovation. I think Uniqlo was very smart to get into the heat tech thing. They've made a fortune off that technology. And then in your industry, there's just so many products coming out, that partner with Fitbit, with your heart rate monitors and heating up your gloves, and this neck warmer actually moisturizes your neck. I don't know how. I can give you the link. But I think we're just going to see more and more innovation in this arena. And as I said, it's about innovation. That's why we have property laws. And so I think this is really the big design leadership question for you when you're trying to figure out, should I get a design patent? Should I fight for copyright protection? What should I do here? I think you need to take into consideration, your consumer base, the entire industry, the design industry. How do you want to shape it? How do you want it to exist in terms of property rights? Do you want to have, an endless landscape of minor fiefdoms, where people own little holes in the sides of sunglass frames? That is the world that we could move into, and I kind of hope that you choose not to go in that direction. So thank you so much for your attention, and I want to thank the people who helped me with the research on this project and the design. Veronica did the design. Thank you.
Do you have any questions for Johanna?
Yeah, we have time for questions and Q&A.
All right. Thanks.
There's one that,
Yeah, go.
So, are these companies, they have a group of people that are going after the patents and looking at just to get more money or get more trouble? Are these people, at Lululemon, do they have someone looking for that all the time as their full-time job?
I have no idea what kinds of human resources they put into this, but I think they felt that once their brand really caught fire and they started seeing variations and knockoffs in the marketplace, they thought, how can we try to secure these overall looks for our brand? How can we do that? And so they turned to design patents in the same way that Jimmy Choo had with the shoes and a lot of luxury sunglass designers have. And it just started lighting a fire because people felt this is not the same as the ornamentation on a shoe. This is a functional thing that we wear to work out. There's not a lot of ways to make a bra inside a tank top. And if you start owning all of the variations on that, this is not good. So I think that's where people started kind of drawing the line, that there was this sensibility that it truly has to be a very artistic kind of object that's attached to a utilitarian design before it qualifies for some kind of design patent protection. That's sort of been the standard in the past. Like a belt buckle that you could sort of pop off, and it's a piece of art. But things are changing, and I think it was just their desperate attempt to really, really protect the brand. And maybe it'll work. Who knows? We're very much still in the midst of it.
Is there a relationship between the 2D nature of protectable things with regard to industrial design patents? Or
I believe so. He's asking about
sorry, utility patents.
Utility patents, and he was talking about 2D designs versus industrial designs, and that really is the kind of key issue with apparel, is that it's a three-dimensional utilitarian design, and so that's one reason that it is not subject to copyright law. A sculpture is a three-dimensional artistic design that has supposedly no use value, and so that's why it has copyright protection. It's like, if it's useless, then it gets copyright protection. Say that to an author sometime, like, it's crazy, these rules. But it's interesting that when you get into, of course, most 3D objects that have any sort of design element to them have a skin, have a two-dimensional texture or two-dimensional image that's on top of them, and those things are protectable. So this is where things can get very confusing. Yeah, there was
Can you just give me a brief example of the difference between a service mark and trademark?
Oh.
Do you know anything about that?
No, does anybody know the difference between a service mark and a trademark? I don't know that terminology. We're gonna look up. We're gonna look that up. Okay, there was one other hand I thought I saw. Don't be shy. Was it over there? No? Oh, he's slapping his face. He's tired. Okay, we need coffee. Okay.
Yeah. So how do you? The distinction for something being novel, like the hole in the sunglasses. There are plenty of things with holes in them. So is it just that it happens that the hole is in a sunglass that makes it novel?
Yes,
I mean, like, is
apparently that was the logic, yes, that it was because the hole is in a sunglass as opposed to some other object, that makes it somehow novel. And so it does have to be a sunglass frame in order to be protected or to be infringing, but that frame can be absolutely any shape. And so that was one thing that sort of surprised me as I really started going through the articles, especially the ones that are written by IP lawyers who think, okay, finally we can get some business in the fashion industry. Because most IP lawyers will say, oh yeah, you know, I do some research on copyright law and the fashion industry, and I usually see them go blank. They're like, copyright law, fashion industry? Wait, there is none. Whoa, I hadn't thought of that. Because they don't litigate there. There's nothing to litigate. Nobody owns anything. Fashion designers don't even qualify for any of the Creative Commons licenses because they own nothing in their design. It's so bizarre. So IP lawyers are always like, whoa, that's an area that I've never done any work in. So they see design patents as a place where they can really drum up some business. Yes, bearded one. There were multiple hands. And then non-bearded one.
I just ran into that service mark issue, and
Yeah, what is it?
It's a service versus a product. So you could
Oh.
offering a service.
It's a mark for a service opposed to a mark for a product?
Correct, like an event or something like that, like structure event could be service mark or something like that. As far as I understand. I'm doing it right now.
I'm doing it right now on my phone. He's doing it right now on his phone.
I just started Struktur event on my phone.
Okay, interesting, yeah.
Does that mean learning cannot be trademarked? Learning? What about learning?
I don't know. I had never heard about this separate designation that I can recall.
I think learning would be a service mark, right?
So non-bearded one. Would you like this? That's you.
My question was, how different do you have to change the design in order for it to be like considered like not under that patent or copyright or design or whatever? Like how different?
I'm often asked that question when I speak at like fashion and design schools. I'm like, okay, how different does it need to be in order for me not to get into trouble? And you know, it turns out it doesn't have to be different at all. The only thing that you cannot use the same textile design.
Okay.
That's a no-no. And you cannot copy the label. You can't copy the trademark and pretend like the other guy made it, you know. Otherwise, you can copy something perfectly. And there was an anecdote in my TED Talk about Prada going to this vintage store, and she pulled out this old Balenciaga jacket. She's turning it inside out. She's going through the whole thing. Her friend is like, buy it. If you like it, buy it. She's like, oh, I'm going to buy it, but I'm also going to copy it exactly in my next collection. And so, you know, people are just like, ooh, that's gross. And it's like, well, actually, what she's exhibiting there is a curator's instinct, right? She can look at the history of fashion and pick out one jacket from 1972 and say, that is fresh now. And that's just a certain kind of genius. It's a special subspecies of genius that a lot of people don't recognize, don't respect. They think if you don't make something new, then who are you? But it's also about resurrecting exactly the right thing at the right moment in time. That too is an amazing skill. And I think that's something that you'll see more. That's an industry that's going to get bigger and bigger. You see it on eBay with those, you know, curators on eBay who make a fortune by combing through and finding exactly the right bow tie, exactly the right hat, exactly the right shoes. They get a cut of all that merchandise that gets sold because they located it, found it, they've developed a brand and aesthetic that people understand, and they're going to get remunerated for it. Oh yeah, non-bearded woman, yes.
So another question I would have is around like fabrication. Like, are there any rules or like things in that laws, I guess, in that realm of like materials being used and things like that?
Well, that I know much less about.
Okay.
And many of those processes are patented, right? And so there you have some very firm intellectual property lines. It's just with the entire three-dimensional design of a garment, that's where you got very little going on unless you have some sort of functional technology embedded within it. And so I think if people are really interested in trying to own the designs that they make, that's probably the route that you probably want to go. And that's, what is the period? It ranges the period for utility patents. You guys probably tell me a lot more about that than I know. Yeah.
What is there anything in particular that's keeping the fashion industry from being able to use Creative Commons licensing or some variation thereof? So it seems like it would make sense to use like, you know, a non-attribution license, something like that, to say, you know, you can use our, you know, ass pants, and you have to attribute it to who designed it. Like that's something that would make sense. But
Right,
is there
right.
anything keeping it from happening?
Well, it was funny because I've worked with the Creative Commons a great deal, and I had seen that they received a lot of applications from people who wanted to get the, you know, who applied CC licenses to their fashion designs. And they had to be told that those were legally non-binding and did not work, because since they did not own the copyright on the design, they could not make the choice to give up certain rights, right? So all rights reserved is de facto what happens when you create an artistic object. You don't have to register it. All rights are automatically reserved. With CC licenses, you volunteer to give up some of your rights. So you may say, you can make copies of it, but you have to attribute it to me. But fashion designers are actually, they have so little copyright protection that the only CC license they qualify for is the PD license, PD0, which is public domain. Which means, I don't own this, you can do whatever you want. It's a very bizarre thing. Okay, any other hands? You're just rubbing your head. Oh yeah.
In the other industry, it feels like I've seen patents come up where it's used less, it seems like less as a litigious thing, but almost more of a marketing handle. And it's a very like customer facing thing for a company to say that we are innovative, we have a patent on this.
Or patent pending.
Yeah. Is that unusual for the outdoor industry as a marketing way? Is that a potentially bad thing?
I don't know how usual or unusual it is, but I have read some articles that from IP lawyers saying if you say patent pending, that means you do have to have filed some sort of paperwork. But even if you think that there's like a 0 chance that you're going to get any kind of protection, you can say patent pending, right? And that will communicate to your customers that, ooh, something special here, special mojo that's going to have protection. And to knockoff artists who are like, oh, well, let's look at something else because it looks like that might get a patent. So it is an interesting marketing ploy that is actually being proposed by IP lawyers, as you can imagine. They're good business people. They're like, try this. This might make your brand actually worth more, even if you don't end up getting the actual protection. So that's a good point.
I just had the idea that, because I know I looked into at the Lululemon, sorry, I know I talk kind of low.
You're quiet.
So the,
Is it? Oh, I think I popped it off maybe.
No, it's,
Yeah.
there we go. So with the Lululemon, this is just an example to use, but like the built-in bra with the tank, and I think that was the one where they went after.
That's Calvin Klein.
Oh, that's.
Well, no, that's Hanes. Yeah,
I thought that was the
sorry.
Hanes one.
Calvin Klein was the ass pants.
Got it. Yeah. Not the ass pants, but the when you were talking about how you really can, do it directly, but you just can't put the label.
Do
or
what directly?
Copy it.
Oh,
pretty
yes.
much directly. So I'm curious, what did Hanes do? Because we deal also a lot in style lines as well, and there's certain style lines that I know that Lululemon uses and whatnot that seem to be very indicative of what is their performance level and what, in certain pieces, they have shorts they patented and whatnot. But what did Hanes do to really infringe on that? I'm curious if you looked into that at all. But
Yeah, I don't know much of the details on it. I just know that they immediately fought back. I'm sure the product probably looked very similar, but if you went to a Target store probably 5 years ago, you probably would have found some stuff that looked pretty similar to that too. And if you went to a Walmart, you'd probably see it in a Sears and a Monkey Ward's. And, when you're talking about these very fine variations, it's like you have to ask, is it worth owning something in the marketplace that is not distinctive? And that's one reason, like if Lululemon could have gotten trade dress protection for one of their looks or some of their looks, a whole collection of their looks, something where somebody would look at it and go, oh, that must be Lululemon, right? That is a much higher level of clearance than you need with the current atmosphere with design patents. And so I've actually seen the articles written by IP lawyers saying, oh, if you can't really show that your thing is distinctive, you should try for a design patent. So that's kind of a diss, right? And what I think most designers should be striving for is something that would actually qualify for trade dress, because that means you've made something so iconic, that's so synonymous with your brand, that everybody will know if anybody is stealing it. And that's, I mean, that's a high barrier to entry, but hey, you know, you guys are superstars. You should do it.
Right.
Are we up? Yep.
Thank you.